Hello, Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. My name is Adam Gorod, and I am the co-chair of the Jewish Veg Washington, D.C. chapter. I'm honored to be able to welcome you to this virtual Jewish Veg Tisha B'Av Shabbat program, From Hatred to Healing. Over the course of the hour, we will have time for reflection, for recipe and virtual food sharing, for discussion. And we want this to be as interactive as possible. So we strongly encourage you to leave comments, insights, suggestions, or even recipes or link to recipes. You can leave those on the Facebook page and YouTube channel on which you are watching this stream. And we'll be highlighting some of those comments on the screen, and we'll do our best to respond throughout the program. But before I go any further, I have the pleasure to introduce Jodie Graber, the Jewish Veg East Coast Engagement Manager, to tell you a little bit more about Jewish Veg.
Good evening, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Adam, for your being the co-chair, for being here tonight and hosting this event. As Adam said, I am the East Coast Engagement Manager for Jewish Veg. This year, we are celebrating our 45th anniversary. For nearly a half a century, we have been the Jewish voice of the plant-based movement. Our mission is to inspire and assist Jews to adopt a plant-based lifestyle as an expression of the Jewish values of compassion for animals, care for our health, and concern for our environment. Our move is sustained by individuals like you who invest in our mission to build a compassionate, healthier, more sustainable world. If you are not yet a member of Jewish Veg, we invite you to become one. You can go to jewishveg.org. We'll put the link up in the comments, and we would certainly love to have you a part of our community. As Adam said, we want to know, we want you to share with us tonight. We want to know where you're from and how you came to be here with us this evening. Did you get an email from us? Did you see it on Facebook? We want to know how we can better connect with our audience around the country, around the world. So let us know how you found us this evening, how you came to be here. Shabbat Shalom to Dustin Hausner, who is the chair of the New York City chapter of Jewish Veg. And I work very closely with Dustin. So nice to have you here tonight. And Adam, I will send it back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jodie. Really appreciate those words. Well, these are precarious times. Look around. Despite its inherent beauty and splendor, our world today is full of suffering and heartache, caused in no small part by us, the traits we choose to exhibit. Egotism, avarice, foolhardiness, and sinat chinam, baseless hatred. And this is not new. We know that. It dates back as far as the Exodus from Egypt, described in the book of Numbers, chapter 11, when the Israelites in the desert cried out for meat to eat, and from their depraved gluttony elicited God's great ire and wrath, causing them to be struck with a great plague, killing many and prompting the location where that occurred to be named the graves of lust. And every year, we remind ourselves of this and the many calamities that befell the generations that followed. And this is done in no small part by our annual observance of Tisha B'Av. It's not just to remember that tragedies occurred in some distant era. And that tells us little about how we should live our lives today in this age. It's so we should remember why they occurred and to contemplate our daily choices and their consequences, both known and unknown. One of the questions on Tisha B'Av is to read the Eicha, the 5-chapter liturgical poem, also known as the Book of Lamentations. It is somber, it's gloomy, it cuts to us, and anyone who read it yesterday on Tisha B'Av surely knows that. It's brutal recounting of what had befallen on Jerusalem because of the hatred that it had ensnared its people. And no verse to me is as stirring as chapter 4, verse 10. Michael, if you wouldn't mind putting that up on the screen. With their own hands, tender-hearted women have cooked their children. Such became their fare in the disaster of my poor people. Well, first, let me recognize the gendered context in which this verse is written with reference to women, purveyors of both food and caregiving, but the circumstances are equally attributable to both men and women in reading of the manner in which they had been stricken. But these were, first and foremost, tender-hearted people, compassionate people at the soul. But with their own volition, with their own hands, they suffered and were the architects of their own suffering. A people who were described in Ezekiel as feasting on the finest flour, date honey, and oil, were now succumbed to eating their very future. Now, I believe in eating and understanding this verse with our modern lens. We should approach it figuratively, not that their dining fare was literally their children, but that the food they were consuming was destructive of their future. It was, in many ways, as if they were eating their children, because what they were eating was destroying their children's future. No matter how tender-hearted they may have been at the core, they were willing, with their own hands, to forgo that which is most important, protecting the world for future generations, as demonstrated so tellingly by what they were eating, whether it was their children literally or anything else that was destructive of that future. And it was, as the verse states, a disaster. And here we are again, no matter how tender-hearted we may be, willing to destroy our future, our children's future, by the food we place on our plates. And we are doing this with our own hands, by our own choices. And many of those watching this program right now may already forgo animal products in their diet. And others may not, and we wholeheartedly welcome you to join us in this community. But yet, either way, we are part of a world where destruction by the foods we eat is commonplace. We see, just for example, the evisceration of communities caused by large-scale factory farms, the rampant deforestation and rising sea levels caused by unchecked carbon emissions, and the unfathomable killing of billions of farmed animals every year. But we have also seen, in just the past few months, the cruel impact on human health by heretofore unknown zoonotic diseases, viruses, transmitted to humans by our encroachment into new environments and interaction with animals. It's on us to prevent the same failings that ensnared Jerusalem many centuries ago, not the least of which is baseless hatred, antipathy towards others, towards our world, from becoming the driving force of our times. Instead, with our own hands, we must heal. We must turn our hearts towards love, towards the tenderheartedness that is inherent to us all, to live in a world where children, future generations, are not the proverbial meal, but are instead the ones being satiated by living in a world full of the beauty and splendor that they are rightfully owed. Now, to demonstrate one of the simplest and tastiest ways of doing so, I'm honored to introduce Sarah Newman, the Jewish Veg DC Chapter Outreach Chair and the author of the Jewish Vegan blog, Nish Noosh. Sarah?
Hi, thank you, Adam. And Shabbat Shalom to everyone. So, as Adam mentioned, I have a blog called Nish Noosh, which is Jewish food that is inspired by the Torah. And so I spent a year creating recipes based on each parsha, each Torah portion. And then I did another year where I created recipes for each holiday and also Rosh Chodesh. So I created a recipe for Rosh Chodesh, for the month of Av, which is a corn soup. And so the month of Av, as Adam so beautifully spoke about, is really, with Tisha B'Av, a month of mourning and sorrow, but it's also the month of Tu B'Av, which is often known as the Jewish Valentine's Day, and a month of love. And so I look at this month as a very, it's hot. I'm in Washington, D.C., where it's very hot and humid, and it's a very intense month, and it's really carrying these contrasting emotions that really, I think we're experiencing so much of during the pandemic. And I think when you look at what's happening in terms of animal welfare and people transitioning their diets and increased awareness, there's a lot to be joyful about. And there's obviously a lot to mourn. I was just driving partially across the country and drove past a truck that was carrying animals to a slaughterhouse. And that was extraordinarily painful and emotional for me. And I think that with Tisha B'Av, the holiday, towards the end of the holiday, you really start to move out of that deep place of mourning and to a place more of hopefulness and looking at the possibilities for hope in the world, and then transitioning to the sense of Tu B'Av and love. So the soup that I created is very much, I think of soup as very much a comfort food, and that we need this comfort in this month of Av, and particularly during COVID in terms of what we're struggling with. And so it's a very easy recipe. It's a cool soup, and it's physically cooling, room temperature. And so it's very simple. The ingredients are just olive oil, corn, garlic, onions, vegetable broth, and then vegan milk, like coconut milk, and salt and pepper. And what makes this sort of Av specific also is that traditionally the meal before going into the fast for Tisha B'Av was egg and bread in ashes. And so I was looking at how to incorporate this idea of ashes into a recipe. And summer is obviously a time to enjoy the incredible bounty of corn. And so in this recipe, there's this, you can take some of the corn husk and just lightly burn it as an ash, and then sprinkle it on top. And it adds an interesting flavor, and it's not much. But so in terms of making this recipe, it's really quite simple, and just requires cooking onion and garlic in olive oil, and then adding some corn kernels, and then the vegetable broth and the vegan milk, and letting that cook for a little bit. And then blending part of the soup to puree it, and mixing that back with this chunky mixture. And then when you serve it, to drizzle olive oil and some cilantro leaves, and then a tiny pinch of the ash. And I think also the ash is just really beautiful. I mean, there's obviously so much symbolism in terms of ash and sacrifices in Jewish tradition. And I look at the ash as sort of this contrasting narrative as well, of you have this rich, alive soup of the corn and then the ash. And so I think it's really carrying, again, these dual emotions that we experience during Av, of the mourning and the joy. So, and I see here, so thank you so much. And I see Stephen Friedman saying lentils works to replace eggs since it's considered a food of mourning. So maybe adding some lentils to the recipe would be a good addition. I'll have to try that. So thank you. So thank you so much, Adam, and to everyone who's joining, and wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbat.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That recipe looked absolutely incredible, and I love the creativity that went into it, and thinking about the ingredients and putting it all together for the month of Av. Now I want to introduce Michael Gribov, the Jewish Veg Director of Member Engagement and Development, to tell you about a new exciting campaign that Jewish Veg is launching. Michael?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you today. I can tell you that just being a Jewish Veg is so inspiring for me and inspiring to work with all of you to advance this movement, the plant-based movement within the Jewish community, for the Jewish community, and for the world. I think today is just, a really good time to reflect on what all of that means coming out from Tisha B'Av. And I just wanted to share a few of my own reflections on Tisha B'Av being the commemoration of the destruction of the first and second temples, same day. When we think about that destruction, kind of in what that looked like, and how horrible that was, and what all that meant, sometimes it's overwhelming to think about what our ancestors have gone through. And for me personally, it's been just so emotional as well, because I spent quite a few years in Israel, actually living in Jerusalem. This is a beautiful shot of the old city and the new city, kind of really right behind it. If you imagine kind of the wall here and then the new city behind that, Jerusalem being destroyed because of our actions, because our actions did not abide by the laws that we were given. And the first law that we were given is what we are to eat, and that was very simple: to eat plants and to eat fruits with the seeds in them. And so there were many of times, including when we were in the desert, wandering for 40 years. And according to the Torah, God gave us manna, and we didn't like that manna, so we decided to ask for meat. And he got very angry at us, and as a result, all of this punishment and Tisha B'Av is kind of connected to that whole theme of not being grateful for what we have. And I think when we think about what's happening in our world today, it's really informative that the virus that we have going on in the world, the pandemic, the coronavirus, is directly related to our food system, to the food that we eat. It is a zoonotic disease. It's been confirmed to be linked to animals, and has really come to our society because of the consumption of animals. So epidemiologists are in agreement that another pandemic, is just around the corner. It's not the first, it's not the last. There's going to be another one in the next 4 to 5 years. If we don't do something now to prevent that from happening in the future. And the best solution really is to move our society to a plant-based food system, and for all of us to adopt a plant-based diet. And that's something that all of us have in our power to control, to create, to be mindful of the food that we're eating every day, and to make those conscious choices, not just for the improvement of our health. Certainly, there's a direct benefit right away. You feel it when you're eating plants versus meat. But also now we can see the devastating effect that it has on everything else around us, on our whole society and in our world with this pandemic, just like it was with the previous pandemics, with SARS and MERS and even HIV/AIDS, connected to contact and consumption of animals. So that's why Jewish Veg, with the support of members like you, is launching a innovative campaign called Toward a Pandemic-Free World, which will inspire people to embrace a plant-based diet to avoid the next pandemic from occurring, but also help shape the national and global conversation that we have right now around the pandemic. Obviously, people are very concerned with safety, that's important, but also what can we do to prevent it? And this is exactly what we should be thinking about right now. How we can connect our behavior to a world that is a better world, a pandemic-free world, and a kinder and healthier and more sustainable world for all of us and for the next generation. Ultimately, plant-based movement is a movement for the future, to sustain the earth and sustain all the creatures and humankind that inhabits it. So I really want to thank all of you for being part of all of our work and for being here today and for supporting us. And I hope that that together we can truly create a pandemic-free world.
Thank you, Michael, for that very informative and helpful context for the work that Jewish Veg is doing. Next up, we have Maddie Reich, a Jewish and vegan recipe creator, food photographer, and blogger who is on a mission to show that vegan food can and should be fun to find, to make, and to eat. Maddie?
Hi, yeah, I am going to be sharing my vegan challah recipe with you all today. And I started baking challah when I was a undergraduate student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and it really actually helped me reconnect with my Jewish identity. And at the time, the challah recipe that my university was using wasn't vegan, and I was vegetarian, but I wasn't vegan. And about midway through, I went vegan and went on a mission to make sure that the challah that my Challah for Hunger chapter was baking turned vegan. And so we worked to make that happen so that it would be more accessible to everyone and to show that challah could be delicious and easy to make and fun for everyone involved, regardless of whether you were vegan or not. And the challah that we made was super popular. And so the recipe that I have now has been developed from that original recipe that I used. And yeah, I'm going to go through a video that's going to go through each of the steps. I do want to say it goes pretty quickly through the challah recipe. I'm not going to go over any specific ingredient amounts or anything like that. It's really more intended to give an idea of what the process looks like. My full recipe is on my website, and I do regularly answer questions through direct message on my Instagram and Facebook. So you can, if you look at the recipe and you have questions about it, you can always feel free to reach out to me. People do that all the time. And then one other thing is that I did slightly change something from the video. In the video from my recipe, the type of yeast that I'm using. So that'll be slightly different from the recipe, but you can see how I did it in the notes of my recipe on my website. So I think we're ready if you don't mind restarting the video. Yeah, so what you're gonna do is dissolve sugar and salt in water, and you'll use a whisk attachment. I'm using one on my stand mixer, which you'll see right there, but you can use it in a bowl with a spoon, and then you'll dissolve some or activate your yeast with a little bit of sugar and some water. And then while that's activating, you'll add some flour to your original mixture, start mixing that in. It'll still be pretty lumpy as that's going. But then after that, you'll add another cup of flour and your yeast mixture and start mixing that in. And you'll see that the texture is really going to start to change here. You'll start adding the rest of the flour and it'll start becoming more of a dough, get thicker, a little bit less sticky. But one thing to note about my recipe is that it is pretty sticky. The stickiness is not going to completely go away. So after you've added all the flour, the next step is going to be to knead your dough. I do it in my stand mixer using a dough hook, but you can also do it on a table by hand. Just flour your surface and flour your hands, but it will be a little bit messy. So after that, you're going to transfer your dough to a bowl and let it rise. It'll about double in size. And then once that's done, you're gonna transfer it to a surface. You'll cut it in half and then cut it in thirds to form your strands. I use like a cutter here, but you can do it by hand, just like rip it apart. You don't have to be gentle with it or anything like that. And then you'll flour your hands and kind of roll it into your strands. You can add, flour as needed if it's sticky. And then once you've got all 3 of your strands, if you're going to stuff your challah, you can see in the video that I'm making kind of like trenches or divots in my challah strands. And that's to be able to like stuff it with whatever you want to use. I'm using raspberry jam. It turned out really delicious, by the way. And then to close your challah strands, you'll fold over one side of the challah and then pinch it against the other side. And it's okay if it's not perfect, because if you have the like seam side facing up, it'll actually create like a really nice image, like of it bursting open and like add some color. It looks really nice if you do it that way. And then you can see here that I'm braiding it. You kind of line up the top parts, and then do a crisscross pattern and readjust the top and then fold over the bottoms. But I'm going to go over that again. We're going to do a live demonstration of that, so you'll be able to see it a little bit better. And then you do that with the rest of your dough. You can repeat, fill it or not, add toppings on top. The big thing here that I wanted to point out is that you can readjust. I pulled off a piece of dough to readjust the sizes. Unless you're measuring it out, they may be kind of like wonky and different sizes, and you can totally like readjust them. And then, yeah, you braid it. You'll transfer them both to a parchment paper lined tray and add it to the oven. And then, oh, actually, before that, you got to let it rise one more time. Sorry about that. It'll get really puffy. And then when about halfway through, you're going to take it out and glaze it. So that glaze is maple syrup and vegan milk, whatever vegan milk you want to use. And then once it's done, you'll test it with a fork between the different like braid strands. And if it comes out clean, your challah is done. And you've made vegan challah. That was super fast, I know. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
It looks absolutely delicious, Maddie. Just absolutely delicious.
Do we want to do the demonstration now?
Sure.
Yeah. Want to?
Okay. This looks like a lot of fun to get your hands dirty doing this.
And I'm sure you know it's worth it too in the end once it's finally cooked.
Maddie, I think your mic is muted on the phone, so we're probably not here. I think we can hear you now.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you now.
Great. Let me. Okay. So what I was saying. Let me turn this up a little bit. So what I was saying is that you are going to line them up at the top so that they're kind of like all together, and you want to pull them far out so that you have space to fold them in. And then you can start with either side, but you're going to kind of crisscross them over and then just keep crisscrossing the outside one in. My dough has been sitting out for a while, so it's kind of soft. But you just keep doing this. And if it's getting stuck to your hands like it is to mine right now, you can just add more flour and just add it to your dough. Ooh. Okay. And even if it is a little soft or gets a little messed up as you're braiding it, it's okay because challah tastes delicious. So if it doesn't look the prettiest, that's totally fine. So I got to the end of my challah braid here, and what I did, it's hard to show it, was that I kind of took the ends of the braids and tucked them under to create a rounded end. And then I'll go back to my top because it's kind of all like splayed out now. It's getting a little stuck together. But then you'll just kind of tighten it up by just crisscrossing again at the top and folding over. And then this can go right on a tray to rise. And that's how you braid challah.
Wow. And how long does it take, Maddie, how long are you baking it for?
So the baking takes, if you're doing like a 3-strand braid, it'll take 40 minutes total, and halfway through you're going to check, or you're going to glaze it. So after 20 minutes. If you use any kind of like liquidy insert, filling, like my raspberry jam one, I think was just not liquidy enough to make it longer time, but anything that's really wet is gonna make it more time because it'll need to like dry up. And then if you do any other different type of shape, it's gonna be a different amount of time. So if you did like a 6-strand challah, that'll probably take more time because it's thicker. If you do like little rolls, those will be less time because they're smaller.
Great. And I do want to remind everyone, we will be sending out the recipes. So you will have all of the ingredients and instructions. But Maddie, we have, can you see the question here from Mindy? What would you say to that? Yeah.
So right now it's using a dry sugar in it. So it's like granules. The recipe would need to be altered to account for the amount of extra liquid if you were to use like a syrup. It's definitely possible. You'd probably have to alter the flour in it. You'd either have to add more or, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what you'd have to do that, but it's possible. I also I use granulated sugar like right now. Sometimes I'll use other stuff like cane sugar that's like organic and things like that. So there are other options. Yeah.
Yeah, here's a thought from Stephen, maybe some date sugar. I was maple sugar or coconut sugar, which again is all sugars, but if we get the granules instead of the liquid, maybe that.
Yeah, as long as it's granulated, it should work the same.
Great.
And also Stephen mentioned using whole grains instead of white flour, and maybe keeping some of the intact whole grains in the challah.
Yeah, I know that changing the wheat will change the texture, so it would be a different texture when it's done. Because it's just a different kind of texture that it adds. So you definitely can experiment with it. One of the things that I talk about on my website a lot, my blog, is that, take my recipes and run with them. Like, I want you to find the things that work for you. And, at the end of every post, I say, leave a comment and tell me like how you changed my recipe and like what you did to make it your own. Yeah. And we were talking, I know Jodie and I were talking before about like gluten-free challah. It's not something that I've tried before, but I know that there are others that have gluten-free challah recipes. And one of the things that I'm hoping to do is make challah even more often than I have been. And that's one of the things that I would like to do is create a gluten-free challah. So also hearing that folks are interested in alternative sugars is something that I am hearing. And so look out for that in the future too.
It's exciting. Every week we have a new Shabbat, and so we have a new opportunity to try different challah recipes and see what works, and just kind of run with it.
Yeah, definitely. And experimenting with challah is one of my favorite things to do. I love to do the different toppings. You can get really interesting flavor combinations like peanut butter and jelly and s'mores, rosemary and garlic. I did a vegan beef and cheese one once because my partner's into more of the savory things. But I've also done it where you kind of alter the actual challah bread itself. So I have a coffee challah that I've made. I have been working on a chocolate challah. So yeah, if you're, challah is such a versatile like thing, so you can really make it your own. If you have a flavor that you love, find a way to make it into challah. That's what I say, because I love challah.
Oh, and here we have, thank you, excuse me, thank you, Jonathan, for this blending oats into oat flour. Works pretty well for gluten-free, so maybe we can try that and experiment.
Yeah.
That's a good tip. Thank you for that. And I think there was a question too about, I saw here, we posted Maddie's website. You can also find her at The Jewish Vegan on Instagram. And again, we'll send these links out in a follow-up email, so you have all the information and can find, Maddie's recipes and Sarah's recipes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer, like I said, any questions via direct message, or if you have any other questions now.
Yep, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Stephen, I know gluten-free, it is challenging and to find, the gluten-free and vegan, it can be a challenge at times, but it works. I'm here to tell you it works. It is possible. Absolutely.
I also think the challenge can be a little bit fun. It's like experimenting, being a scientist. And I think that's kind of wonderful. You can find new ways to do things, which I think is awesome.
Absolutely. And it's funny because the perfectionist in me is always afraid to experiment. I need it to come out perfect the first time, but I appreciate you saying that. That gives me hope. So
yeah,
thank you.
What I always say is that I don't think I've ever made anything that my partner would not eat. And I've made some not so good things, like experimenting. And so, if it doesn't look pretty, if the texture isn't 100% right, it's probably still okay to eat, especially being vegan. We don't have to worry about things necessarily being cooked to not be raw, like meat might necessarily be. And so if you're having fun and you are learning something and growing, I think that's the most important part for me. And there's always ways to grow in the kitchen. Always new things to learn.
Yep, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Let's see. Anybody else have any questions on Raquel? It's so nice to have you here. Raquel is the other co-chair of the DC chapter. So we're sorry you can't be with us live now, but yes, it's the middle of the night for you, Raquel. So thank you very, very much for being here.
And Raquel makes some great gluten-free options. She is at the Vegan Maven on Instagram. She has great gluten-free recipes.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So any other questions, or if anybody, has a challah recipe that you make and you want to share tips about that, please do. Please comment on the comments. We absolutely want to hear from you. Or if you have a favorite, vegan Shabbat recipe that you make often or for guests, let us know what that is as well.
Yeah, one other tip I'll give is I spent so many years, basically from the time I started making challah. I talked about going to undergrad and making challah in undergrad. That was the first time I ever made or ate challah. And from the time I was in undergrad until probably a few months ago when I started making a lot more challah, I pretty much would eat challah right as it came out of the oven, because I was like, this is so good, I have to eat it right away. But I just discovered, a few months ago that if you let it cool completely, it actually has a much better texture. It's still delicious right out of the oven, and if you can't wait, it's totally fine. but the texture is like just that much better that it's like worth it for me now to wait.
Yeah. Good. That's good tip. Good tip.
Maddie, with us
Yeah.
just having passed Tisha B'Av and thinking about the high holidays coming up, have you ever made a round challah?
I haven't. So all of the challah that I have made is pretty much, I made like small round challahs, I guess, like rolls or knots, and the 3 braid ones. Because I spent in Challah for Hunger, which is the organization that I worked with. We pretty much, that's all we did. But my goal this year, I think between now and Rosh Hashanah, is to perfect some other types of challahs, some other shapes. Because I see it's like basically artwork to me. I see it on like Instagram. They're so beautiful. And so that is really a skill. And if anyone knows how to do that who's on the call, or on the who's listening in, I think that's a highly prized skill you have. So it's something that I'm hoping to be able to do as I start making even more challahs.
Terrific. And what about this question here from Jamie about chia seeds? Have you ever used chia seeds to keep dough together?
I've done it in other recipes. My challah recipe doesn't need any like chia or anything like that. All of the ingredients that you saw in the video were the ingredients that are needed. It's actually only 8 ingredients total. So it's an 8 ingredient challah. And really the binding comes from like the flour mixing in with the liquids and like the gluten forming and all of that. Causing it to like bind together. Yeah, that's really what binds it. And then the gluten, like the strands, really help too. But there's no egg or any like egg alternative needed.
Perfect.
I wonder if in a gluten-free challah, using chia seeds or even aquafaba as a possibility to try to use as a binding agent, it would be fun to experiment with.
Yeah, definitely. It's not like, I don't think it's like necessary for the recipe, but you can always experiment and try different things. I also read somewhere that you can use aquafaba as like an egg wash alternative. I've never tried it, but it's supposed to make it look like really brown. Yeah, look really like glazed like an egg wash does.
Great. I actually have some aquafaba. For the first time, I've saved it in the refrigerator because I made some chickpea tuna the other day. So I have to go searching for something to use aquafaba for. So.
There's lots of recipes out there.
Yes. Yeah.
And it looks like someone said that you can substitute the oil with blended cashews. I hadn't heard of that for like a challah recipe, but that's cool. That's awesome.
Well, Jeremy, you're lucky there that your partner is making the vegan challah. Very lucky. Yeah.
If I was gonna substitute the oil in this, I might do it with like unsweetened applesauce or something. That might be a good alternative.
Cool. I like that. Yeah.
Are you using fruit too in the challah, trying diced apples or raisins, give it a little bit more of a seasonal fare?
Yeah, for like Rosh Hashanah, I've done like cinnamon sugar apple challah. It's kind of like apple pie, but challah.
Oh, yum. And Lynn, I see your comment. You're saying wild by nature in Huntington. I'm not sure where you're from, if that's Huntington, Long Island or Huntington, California or something, but I'd love to know. If you can let us know. I'm curious.
Oh, a sweet potato recipe. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
So there's so many different ways to do it. You can find something to like suit your needs. And if you can't, then just like try to do it. That's what I think.
No, I think that's a good, a good way to approach it. Just try and see what happens.
Yeah.
Oh, and here's another. So here's a place in Southern California. Got kosher pretzel challah. That sounds good. So there are a lot of options, and I think this is also what we tell people a lot. You don't have to give anything up to enjoy a plant-based diet. I'm delighted to hear that that's Huntington, Long Island, because I am in New York City. So I'm gonna have to follow up on that and get some vegan challah out there. So thank you very much, Lynn, for letting me know that. But yeah, as I said, we don't have to give up anything. We can enjoy all of this delicious food, in general, and then for our holidays as well. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Apple butter is delicious on challah and also in challah. I've made apple butter like stuffed challah before.
I don't know, Maddie, I think we're all just going to move in with you because we can try all of this.
Well, I'm happy to share. I make a lot of challah, so I usually share it with my neighbors because there's too much.
Ah, that's nice of you. It's very nice of you.
I was going to say one other thing, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, I was going to say there are places also in DC, if folks are in DC, I don't know how many are, that sell vegan challah. I know that Sticky Fingers Bakery does. So if you're looking to purchase challah, you can also do that.
Yes,
And
I know my sister. Oh, yes.
And Supergirl in DC also sells vegan challah from Breadsmith, which is a bakery in Potomac, Maryland, in the DC area.
Cool.
Yes.
I didn't know that. So another place to get challah.
But it's great to have these recipes, so that way you don't have to go out. Shabbat's coming. You don't have the opportunity to get to the bakery or the store, so you can just kind of whip out the ingredients from your cabinet and make it yourself.
Yeah, I think also being able to pick what flavors you want is really fun. It's also really fun to do with friends, or maybe not right now because distancing, or you could do it virtually maybe, or do with kids too. Because they can kind of pick the flavors that they want.
Yeah. So
have you tried, Maddie? I was just going to say, have you tried jumping into other maybe noodle-based dishes like kugels?
So I haven't made kugel yet. I have other I'll say Jewish kind of recipes. So I've made sufganiyot last Hanukkah. Not Halloween. Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. That's probably why it's on the brain. But last Hanukkah, I made sufganiyot, so jelly stuffed donuts. That recipe, if you are interested in it, you could also direct message me for it. It's not on my website yet because my website wasn't up when I made the recipe. I also have a latke recipe. Trying to think what other. Yeah, I mentioned my coffee challah recipe. I'm working on a chocolate challah recipe. But yeah. How long did it take for you to make your first successful challah? That's a good question. I think what was really helpful for me was that I was working with an organization that made challah all the time. So I was working with the nonprofit Challah for Hunger, my university's chapter of that organization. So I had people who made challah every single or every other week around me to help me figure out how to make it. And they kind of taught me the ropes, and then I made challah every 2 weeks for 3 years, basically. So I made a lot of challah then and became really consistent with it. But I'll say maybe a better question for me might be when did I become confident in the challah that I made? That I could do it by myself. And I think that was probably maybe a month or two in, that I could make a challah. Maybe it wouldn't look the prettiest, but it would taste good, and I could do it by myself. No one had to walk me through it. And I think your braiding, the look of it is only going to get better with practice. So my challah, the pictures that I take, they look that good because I've spent 6 years now making challah and braiding challah. So it's like second nature to me, like how to do it. It was actually a little bit difficult to like slow down and like show the process because my like muscle memory was kind of taking over. So yeah, I think you measure success in your own way. And for me, it was like, when did I feel confident? And I think, yeah. Oh, I do have a matzo ball soup recipe. It is in, I actually have a vegan kosher for Passover guide that you can find in a link in my bio on Instagram. It is recipes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for every day of Passover. And they're all kosher and all vegan. So if you're interested in that, you could take a look at that. And there's a matzo ball soup recipe in there. It does use the Manischewitz mix because that's what I grew up eating. But I call it Gragra's matzo ball soup recipe because my grandma, I call her Gragra, and she used Manischewitz. Like, that's the matzo ball soup she made. And it is vegan, like, on its own. If you just have to use, like, you don't put chicken in it, or, you do everything else vegan with it. And so but you have to do a specific method. It took me like several times to make it vegan because you're supposed to use eggs when you make it normally. And if you don't use the eggs, they break apart a little bit easier. So there is like a specific like dropping in method and scooping them out and how to store them and things like that. So I talk about all that in the guide. The history of challah and how it's implemented in the holy days. Not my expertise per se. I don't know if either of you know much about that.
I actually don't. I don't think I do.
Well, so I think challah means just a portion, and it was a part of the offerings that were given with the first grains that were at the temple back centuries ago, and then it gets from there became kind of associated with this bread that was eaten on Shabbat in particular, but really just a cultural phenomenon more than religious based, besides just the fact that a challah is taken, this idea of the first bread of the harvest is marked, set aside, and relegated as a special portion.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's exactly right. The mitzvah of challah is like the first. I think there's a few different ways you can do it. Don't quote me on this. This is what I learned a long time ago. Taking like a bit of the dough before you bake it, or it might be you have to do it after it's done. I'm not sure, but you take a bit and you have to burn it as like to represent the mitzvah. And then there's a prayer that you can say with it. And that is like, if you see like kosher challah, that is something that they've done with it. Yeah. I was also like going to mention when I first started making challah, one of the things that really attracted me to it was when I was like, I make challah by hand sometimes now because it's therapeutic for me. But I made it by hand all the time when I first started making it. And I really felt like connected to my like ancestry, the Jewish past behind me, like, because it was something that like generations behind me did, like made bread in whatever form they did it. And so to me, it is like spiritual in a lot of ways. Whether you are observing the like mitzvah itself of like burning the piece of the challah, or you're observing like the spirituality in another way, I think either, or if you're doing something totally different, I think is totally fine. I think challah is what you make it. Both literally, you can make it whatever flavor you want, and like spiritually for yourself. I missed a lot of comments, so I don't know.
Yeah. And I also do want to let everyone know, people are asking for, for different types of recipes. We do have a lot of recipes on our website, jewishveg.org. You can go there and see. And I will invite you to email me if there's a recipe you are looking for that you haven't been able to find or need to make vegan. jgraber@jewishveg.org. That's J and then GRABER if you want to email me, and we'll do the work, and we'll find recipes, and we'll talk to our our resident chefs like Sarah and Maddie, and we will get the recipes for you.
Yeah, I was also gonna going off of that. If you direct message me, the idea for creating the guide came from someone asking me about if I was gonna have any kosher for Passover recipes. So if you are looking for different recipes, you can always message me, because sometimes that gives me ideas for things to make, and you might see it pop up, and I might even credit you for it.
Great. No, we are very lucky to have very very smart people who have this information and who are so willing to share it with the Jewish veg community. So thank you so much, Maddie.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So happy to be here.
So it looks like we have just a few minutes left if anyone else has any comments or ideas to share. I would just say it's great hearing these great recipes that you can make, going from this really mournful period of Tisha B'Av, this day that we had yesterday, to the creativity and possibilities, especially thinking about the high holidays that are coming up, which is often a time of, and with Sukkot after that, of feasting and of making good use of the harvest. There are all these possibilities, and it just kind of, I feel like the program tonight has really just been exemplified that spectrum. It's been really great to see.
Absolutely, Adam. I appreciate you saying that. And I think, what Michael was saying before about the campaign that Jewish Veg will be launching gives us hope, after the morning of Tisha B'Av, the hope for the future. We know what we can do to to help people understand that we can create future pandemics by making choices about the food on our plates. And so we are just delighted on behalf of everyone. I think, for Sarah for sharing her recipe, Maddie for you and everything you've shared with us. Adam, you as the co-chair of the DC chapter, you do so much work, and we appreciate you so very much. Of course, Michael, who was here before, like I said, does just incredible work. Everyone at Jewish Veg does. And I will just say that this is the reason why I wanted to work with Jewish Veg, was to combine my love of Judaism and my passion for a plant-based diet and have a community around that. And that is absolutely what I have gotten and more. So I do invite you all, please check out jewishveg.org. We invite you to become a member. We'd love to have you in our community. We do have chapters in DC. We have a chapter in LA, a chapter in New York City, and we want to make an impact across the country, across the world. So we're so glad that you're here to help us do that. And we just appreciate everyone being here. Of course, we wish you a Shabbat Shalom. May it be restful and peaceful. And you will receive an email on Sunday with lots of information, everything we discussed here tonight. So we thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.